This is Alex Murdaugh. I need police and an ambulance immediately.
Hi, I'm Dana Harris-Bridson, editor-in-chief at IndieWire, and today we're here with the creators of Murdaugh, Death in the Family, which is now playing on Hulu. We have lead actor and executive producer Jason Clarke, co-creator and executive producer Erin Lee Carr, co-creator, showrunner, and executive producer Michael D. Fuller, hair department head Katie Ballard, makeup department head Addison Foreman, and casting director John Papsidera. Welcome. And boy, do I have questions. This was a story that when it came out, I found absolutely fascinating. And actually, I felt like I knew a fair bit about. But the thing that I really found so compelling about the show is that it gave, I felt like, a 360 perspective on who these people were and how this could happen. It suddenly, what seemed outrageous suddenly seemed very believable. And so I wanted to know, for Erin and Michael, how did you guys come to the project?
Just for myself, I'm born and raised in South Carolina. Grew up about an hour away from where all of this took place. And so I was very aware of this story as it was unfolding, thanks in large part to Mandy Matney's reporting, who's obviously one of our executive producers and whose reporting was a lot of the basis of what we did. And so it was one I was very aware of. And I was sort of, working in TV and being a writer and producer, it was percolating that there could be something here in this true crime era we live in, and a story that would potentially, one, kind of go behind the headlines in the way that you spoke to, and something that would not just be, told through the prism of tragedy and crime and criminal and victim. All those things are there, obviously, but like really, for me, knowing and feeling such a sort of a responsibility to the region, the community, growing up around these types of families and these types of people, it felt for me like something that was very much a responsibility. And in doing so, I connected with Erin, who was working with some other executive producers of ours at Eat the Cat and Universal Content Productions.
I think that, given the popularity of the, and the intensity in which people were viewing this story, we knew that we could only get to it by like really having the right cast. And it was that the whole thing, it would live and die by the casting. And so, I think that we had a really good idea of what it would be, but it really was like we didn't have a show until we got Patricia and Jason on board. And so that's when it became really real. But I think that, it was just a nerve-wracking process. I made documentaries for a living, and I knew that this was a big story, but we knew that we wanted to infuse the story with those real truths. And so that's what we set out to do, and with the writing, and then the actors breathed, with the help of John, and then wonderful Katie and Addison, breathed all the life into it in which it exists today.
Jason, your performance was really amazing because I feel like I recognize this person. I was raised in Texas, and you're what we would have called a good old boy. Somebody who was just sort of, very powerful, had the kind of, lackadaisical drawl, but you knew not to mess with them. And it's a pose that's very casual, but there's kind of steel underneath it. And I wanted to know, where did you find that character? Where did that come from for you?
I mean, they're everywhere. America's got a great tradition of them. Tennessee Williams wrote them very well. Cat and Hot Tin Roof, and Australia's got them as well. My grandfather. I mean, you draw them on all kind of levels. Dan, it's like, somebody that just, was not afraid to, a velvet glove with an iron fist underneath it. And I love what you said at the beginning, that the point and the reason for doing these is to put the people in them, because it demystifies them. It takes away, the hindsight that we have when we watch it or think that we know something, and it makes these people real. And I think you get that from, say, like I love Downfall, where they did Adolf Hitler's last week in the bunker. It demystified that last week of these gigantic figures, and even to say Titanic for the boat when it sank, by putting real people there, but both opposite ends of the same thing. And so these characters are everywhere in American history and Australian history too. That they're working for everybody, but they're working for me first, and nobody appreciates what they're doing for what they're doing for you, and so it gives you an easy out psychologically to justify your behavior, and then occasionally you get someone like Alec who takes justification to a level, that's unfathomable.
What we're after, what I'm after, to be blunt, is money. Oh yeah. $1.1 million of it specifically.
How much research did you do for the part?
I mean, a lot. I guess I had months, and this was easier because it was a fascinating subject. I love the court case itself, and you could watch it and listen to it and hear it play out emotionally and visually, and hearing the courtroom laugh at a certain point when Waters made fun of him jetting up and jetting back. You hear all the, so I listened to it a lot because it became like a good book, and out of that, you just found yourself behaving in a certain way, with certain gestures that I had pictures or videos of him I'd do. I'd repeat them to get, just to put it on different levels inside me, and then wrestling with, I wrestled with everybody apart from John, but like with Addison and Katie and, and Erin and Michael, to even in terms of like, dude, I didn't do it, man. They got me on a RICO here, So these are the ways that you just find yourself into it, so you can play this man at the heart of this because he's still a real person, and it is a pretty simple story. For all of its horror and everything else, it's not this far away, unreachable thing that you, when you see it ripped from the headlines, that we think it is. It's very tangible and very real, and that makes it all the more heartbreaking. And I hope, particularly for everybody that watches, including the people that were involved in the town, that they feel some empathy and connection to themselves and their community.
Was there any communication with the Murdaughs or anybody else who's in the actual story?
The Murdaughs themselves, we sort of, in general, our guiding principle was to approach things with an abundance of sensitivity, and especially with them in terms of, that family and that name and the people who are survivors and the loved ones they lost. So we kind of kept them, let them be where they were in time and space. But we definitely did talk to some other people who knew the family very well, and some people who worked with the family, and I can cite Mark Tinsley, the real Mark Tinsley, who was the attorney of the Beaches, who we dramatized that story, and I know him. I talked to him extensively. Aaron and I talked to him extensively to get details, and then Jason connected with him, and it was that was really invaluable. So we had a couple of the young people who were involved in the boat crash, some of their parents we were able to connect with, who not just through the boat crash, but knew the Murdaughs, the real Murdaughs throughout, a history that went way before that boat crash. So, we wanted to just approach everything we were doing with a tremendous amount of sensitivity for the people we were directly talking to, and then the ones we weren't, including the Murdaugh family. And I think that, really that spirit was taken to a whole other level with what Jason did, with what Patricia did, with what Johnny and Will did with their performances, because it was, as Jason was saying, it's like, these are real people. Like, how do we humanize them and dramatize them and round them out and not just have them be, again, one's a criminal, one's a victim. Like, what is that space between? And, we couldn't have had a better and more phenomenal cast to bring all that to life.
No, it was really impressive. I mean, that's amazing that you were able to work with so many of the actual people from the story. Have you heard anything from them in terms of how they, how they're viewing it? We've gotten some feedback, that's been extremely positive. If I interrupted somebody, I apologize. But just that, Jason's mannerisms, I've gotten word from Mark Tinsley, who knew Alec well before they were involved in civil litigation, and they had worked cases together and were friends and had hunted together. And he's just blown away by things that he says that no one else would even clock or know, but that he sees that Jason has internalized from all the research and just the emotional connection and all of that. That's, and Jason's like,
oh God, wig, and he starts getting weird.
Yeah, you put that wig on to Katie, and then Addison doesn't stretch and stipple, and you're just it's transformative. But I think that, and then we've, Eric Bland, who was an attorney who represented the Satterfield boys, who is the sons of the housekeeper, Gloria, who Alec obviously stole a bunch of money from them in an insurance settlement. He shared some really lovely thoughts about how we humanize Gloria and didn't just paint her as the housekeeper. So it certainly seems as though at least the spirit of what we're doing with some corners, we can't speak for everybody, obviously, and these are highly sensitive, sensitive topics for everyone who lived through them. But at least it seems as though what we tried to aspire to in terms of that sensitivity is being, somewhat felt by the people involved.
Oh, you were mentioning the wigs, and Katie, I wanted to ask you about that because the wigs were kind of characters unto themselves with it's like that, I don't even know what to call it. It's like that old rusty color that of a red-haired man as he's going gray. Yeah. And it's a very specific and strange color. And so like, how did you get to that color? Because it's like, that is something it feels like not found in nature. And yet I have absolutely seen it. I've seen it many times.
Yeah, this was a whole red saga and story between the family, because when you get into it, you realize not only did they all have different shades and tones of red, but also it looked completely different depending on what lighting they were in. And so it became sort of a comparison between Paul, Buster, and Alec, and looking at what makes the tones of their reds different and how can we ensure that we show that on camera. And looking at photos of Alec when he was young, his hair color was very close to Buster's, but also tonally somewhere in between Paul and Buster. It was very vibrant and more so copper, but it also had a little bit of a red-violet kind of tone similar to Paul's in it. And then you can see as he aged, that vibrant red just starts to get kind of dusty looking, and then he eventually had pure white coming in. And that specific tone was very difficult to dial in, and I had to do a lot of just very subtle tweaks. And anytime I tweak it, it's very specific color formula, and then very carefully brushing it into the piece. So I had my wig maker tie Jason's wigs with a blend of white and then a copper, natural copper that he found, but then I had to, from there, color it further to really get it dialed in. And it was almost sort of a apricot tone that I had to add into it in the end. And then we also had to do a lot of tests to make sure that tone would translate well between the really bright light of the outdoors and then the more darker interior sets that we were in. And I also wanted to ensure that it didn't look like hair that had just been bleached, because it's a tone that's very similar to that. And so really dialing in that apricot tone was the thing that took it to the right place.
Yeah, it looks right because it is a very unique shade.
No, it is right, Dan. I rocked up in my next job and they were ready to dye my hair. Literally. They thought we'd probably have to dye Jason's hair because he was red. And it's not easy. It's really not easy.
So, Addison, what were your biggest challenges makeup wise?
Well, Jason naturally has a darker tone to not only the hair on his head, but his eyebrows. Johnny and Will also, especially Will, has a really deep, dark tone. So we had to lighten eyebrows. We had to lighten armpit hair. We had to lighten arm and leg hair. Because there's a lot of scenes specifically with Johnny where Paul's in shorts, cargo shorts. And then when we go to the Bahamas, we see full body hair. So lightening hair and making sure, I think the biggest concern at the beginning was the red tones in Jason's skin and having them too punched up to show this gingered man who doesn't take care of his skin, who abuses alcohol and drugs, who is constantly outdoors, whether he's hunting or out in the fields, what have you. A lot of photos of Alec where while he is pale, he runs hot and he is always red, especially around the peaks of his forehead, around his neck. So making sure we do something that's not cartoonish, but also is like rooted in that beet red tonality of someone in the South out in the heat. So we did just subtle washes, subtle freckling, trying to use some of Jason's tonality without going too pale or too red and meeting right in the middle, using a little bit of landmarks in Jason's skin texture and his natural freckling, which is very minimal, but we kind of used those as landmarks and grew from there. and just keeping him quite wet throughout the show because Alec was a big sweater. And especially once we start divulging into the drug use, we have a roller coaster of sweaty scenes and then dry scenes and then back to sweaty scenes. And anytime you mix sweat with makeup, things can start to fall apart. So we found a really healthy mixture of how much makeup and how much sweat we had on any given day.
What do you use for sweat? What's the formula?
Well, it's a range from glycerin, which glycerin works great, but it doesn't mix well with a lot of like cream foundations or prosthetics, which we didn't use on this show. But sometimes you can use even like a KY lubricant is a good one. But for this one, we just went with Evian sprays because we knew it was something that was going to be changing so often that we could not have something on Jason's skin that would then have to be removed for the time in which we were shooting to then redo makeups throughout the day and to constantly chase that. So we just stuck with a classy can of Evian throughout the day. And it also helps to refresh the skin a little bit.
Yeah, the skin looked spot on because it had that kind of alcoholic rosacea look.
Yeah, we kept it really ruddy.
It covers a long range too. I mean, they went through a long range of the years of Alec, and he changed very dramatically. Even if it is subtly, whether it's weight and even in jail and out of jail, the colors there. We wasn't getting as much sun. There was a lot, and in a way, he gets healthier as it goes on, as he gets stronger, even in prison. And it was, I loved what both Katie and Addison did because it was never at any point did we want to cross over where people didn't believe what was going on. The sweat had to felt earned, the hair had to feel real, whether I was itching it or pulling it or scratching it or putting my glasses on it, so that it could just become part of you. Accept this man as this is our Alex Murdaugh. Even though you've seen hundreds of millions of people have seen him quite intently.
So the another element of portraying Alec that I found really impressive is his eating. It seems like he is constantly eating. He is, and there's like a kind of a desperation to it because there's like, it's not normal, like sitting down to have a meal. It's like trying to stuff it down, like you're trying to make something go away.
Somebody else might steal it.
Yes, or someone. Oh, yes, or someone.
I'm eating it like I stole. There's a saying: you drive a car like you stole it. No, but those are. I have a list of cliches I write down for characters before they play them. Things that are just like, if in case of emergency, you don't know what you're doing, break glass and just hit one of these on the head. And that was it. Drive it like you stole it, man. You know what I mean? Like there is no tomorrow. You want back?
No, thank you.
You want something else?
No.
Oh, come on. Nothing is too good for my lady. There was an element in Alec when you watch a lot of that stuff, particularly when he turns and apologizes at the end when he had two sentencing trials, the one for the murders and then the one for the financial things. And there was an element of somewhere in there, and I think there might have been some things that he said that he knew, and we portrayed in one of the episodes. It wasn't come out yet when the brother comes in, Randy comes in and says, why? I think he knew the sky was going to fall on his head at some point. And so to tie it into, yes, there's the straight up visceral sugar addiction, consume, whether it's oxygen or food, whether it's, dominate everything, keep everybody entertained is the opposite side of that, there's just the opposite. And so there was like that element of, and we had some great scenes with the chicken, when they're all fucking getting up and leaving the table and I can't even finish my fried chicken, you know what I mean? Or I can't even get my fucking dessert, there's just this level of, he's at war with everything and everyone, whether it's it's a dead fried chicken.
And so much of that was, it was, like birthed from a lot of the research we had done, which was, like the Capri Suns that were found like in the gun room when after the night of the murders, and like the shopping list, all of these things where you talk to people, he would pour chocolate milk over like Fruit Loop cereal and stuff, like just this. He had the diet of a child in a lot of ways because of that. What Jason said, that like. That thing that I think Jason then tapped into, and it became its own thing where he was, it folded so beautifully into I say beautifully because it was beautiful to watch, but I'm sure eating all of the chicken I know I watched him having to eat that chicken or that steak, or that he's in the lobster cutting up in episode 3 and all that stuff. Like Jason was eating all of that stuff
Oh my
constantly,
God.
obviously. But I remember we got a note on I think it was episode 1 or whatever, when Alec comes in and he pours the chocolate milk on the cereal, and a lot of people flagged it as, oh wait, no, did you know that was chocolate milk? That's a mistake. It's like, that's not a mistake. This guy was, and Jason had to eat that every time on screen.
John, tell me what it was like casting for this. I mean, obviously you've got a great base to work from with Jason and Patricia, but how did you build it out from there?
Well, Jason wasn't in when I started.
Really?
That was part of our work. Yeah. It was part of our work to seduce Jason. But I had the pleasure of casting him in Oppenheimer, and I've known Jason for a lot of years, and I just know not only the quality of actor that he is, but the quality of human that he is. And, it's something that Michael, and you're welcome, Michael and Erin and I talked about a lot, that this was going to be a tough shoot. It was a sensitive thing. We didn't want to make it more complex and more difficult, Michael had, a community to worry about, and in a home state where he, grew up in. So, just listening to Jason talk, and even Addison and Katie, like, there's such specifics that you guys talk about. I kind of go, well, I get a brilliant actor and he fills in all those pieces, So I always, from the very beginning, when we first talked, I thought Jason would be the perfect, Alec. And then we set about getting him. And, I think the big thing that we talked about too is keeping it grounded and real. It's very easy to slide into a cartoonish or a two-dimensional version of what a Southern, world is like. I'm from Florida originally, which people don't think it's Southern, but it's Southern. And
it is.
yeah. And so, you wanted to try and get, like with Gloria, there was a big conversation that we had about, it's a class distinction. It's a finance feeling, of that. It's not, she's just the maid. I love the idea that, Kathleen was able to pull off the fact that she could have been Maggie in another version, just socioeconomically, she wasn't that. And so, and what does that really feel like for somebody to work in the home of somebody that's just like you, but they're not. And so we wanted that pathos. We wanted those, small kind of moments that felt real and grounded and true, and Patricia does that over and over again in her performances. I knew Jason was, perfect for that. And, finding Johnny and Will, there's a lot of people that we looked at, tons of people that we looked at. We were worried about skin color. We were worried about hair color. We tried to get it as close as we could. And I think the biggest thing is people always responded to the writing and the material. And, my hands are tied if it's not on the page. And, luckily, the writing appealed to people. They saw the depth and the specificity of it. And that's always a huge advantage. And then, appealing to actors' sense of being able to play something.
Well,
dude, it was a very deep cast, John. So if you don't mean to interrupt, because it really was. I've spoken to John. I cannot, but don't even feel like an example of like having to front up every day. And we were on a tight schedule, and you never want to take as the main actor. You never want to take all the camera time and all the rehearsal. You want to let, everybody's got to do down their work, and the actors, like from Noah, there was just such a deep bench. Everybody came in, and it made my day so easy. Not easy, but like without that, I don't know what I would have done. Because people were just under pressure. You got to hit it, and they just kept coming right down to the very end. With the casting of Waters and my defense lawyer, Spencer. It was just like, oh man, it was a pleasure to see them all walk in one after another and just look around and go, my God, you know.
Do you feel that, Jason, on a set? Do you worry like, oh shit, here comes so and so? Like, do you worry about who's showing
John,
up the next day?
absolutely, because nerves are contagious, and it's really, as an actor, you feel for somebody when they're nervous on a set, so you go out of your way to make people calm. Particularly if I'm there every day and all day, and I know this crew back to front, and it's my set, I guess, in a way. So, but it's such a nice feeling when somebody like Noah, like all those, everyone, literally everybody, Kathleen, what she did was extraordinary. There's just it settles everybody down. You know what I mean? It calms everybody's nerves, and everybody feels like, and they take the time to demand the time that's needed to lay their work out and give the character and the story and the scene the beats that are needed. And there was not one.
Gracious of you to say.
Not one.
That was gracious of you to say.
No, it's a fact, dude. I'm not being gracious. It's a fact. But it is. On a shoot like this. Yeah, but on a shoot without Rob coming in at the end, dude, it was just like it was unworkable, But but that's the we're trying to set it up there high and say, okay, these extra pages we want to put in now because it's right, and we're at that point and we know how to do it. We're able to do that with a guy like him, when with Spencer. Yeah. So it was just, it was one of the best casting up there with Oppenheimer as well too. But that was one of the best casting jobs I've seen, really.
Thank you. That's very kind.
I'm demanding you come on my other one too.
But I had partners in that.
Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to hijack you. I just I find these talks interesting with everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Michael and Erin have impeccable taste. So, it was also, it was all of us. And, somebody wouldn't like somebody, and then we'd all talk about it, and somebody might not like somebody else. But, it is done in collaboration, and it is done with people that have, a common goal to find the best character, find the best actor, and to really find the truth of those moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the script for Erin and Michael. I mean, obviously you worked with Mandy based on her podcast, and I would think, but tell me if this is true, that would be useful in kind of having the beat by beat format that a podcast has in terms of like breaking up a story. How did you take that and sort of run with it to create this very rich portrait? Because it doesn't feel in any way like this, like, oh, this is a podcast. This is a story unto itself.
Yeah, no, that's a terrific question. And I think, the thing is, her podcast is so all encompassing. I mean, nooks and crannies of this case that are like, I distinctly remember early on when I heard the jellyfish detail that Alec had been in business with starting a jellyfish business, and that was like, okay, that's a thing that we can file away and use and incorporate because it's vivid and it feels of the natural world, and it's that's the type of texture, no pun intended, that you need for these kind of things. So it's like, she was so in the weeds, and I mean that in a good way, with her coverage, that then allowed us to say, okay, then let's strip it down. Erin and I strip it down and say, what does this look like in a narrative form? Because that's, obviously the podcast is a narrative in a way, but it's also, she's a journalist, she's reporting it. It's as much her reporting on it that we drew on as it was the podcast 101. And Erin obviously has ample experience with what she does, taking these true stories and breaking them down into a narrative format. But it was like, okay, what is the inciting incident of this? And that was really where we started from, right, Erin?
I think it's really important to work with journalists who have covered this before. I was raised by a journalist, David Carr, for the Times, and in every single one of my documentaries, it features a journalist. This is the foremost expert on it, and it's not like we came here and we got to know everything. It's really it's like a duty and an honor to pay tribute to those who have come before you. And also that's who set us up with people involved in the real story. So we were able to have those on background conversations with people who had really not spoken before, wasn't going to do it publicly. And when you think about Maggie and you think about Alec and you think about the boys and Mandy, we needed to infuse with these very these underreported aspects. And for us, like, Maggie was such a character that had basically no backstory. And so that was a huge thing of working with Mandy and then talking to the people inside the story. Who was she before this happened? Why did she get lumped in with Alex crimes when she herself was a victim? And so that was a huge mission of ours in trying to understand. And you just don't get there without journalists.
I won't use your name at all. I don't want to cause you any more pain or stress. Not with what you're going through. Obviously, I didn't know Mallory, but she seems like a really amazing girl. Yeah. And we won't stop till we do right by her.
So what was the biggest challenge in terms of telling the story, like figuring out how to make it make sense for the audience?
It was an exercise in streamlining and making, what I call, and I stole this from another writer, a very accomplished author named Tim O'Brien, but it's what's the story truth of it. So we always know what the truth, which is the actual, just the facts, ma'am, what the podcast, what a well reported article or story is. We have all of that at our disposal. Erin created this, this doorstop, which I have somewhere around here, that of research that was just scores and scores of every detail. But then we know we have all of that. So then if we're laying it out in a narrative form, we know we've got 8 episodes. Let's then figure out, okay, we can't tell every single, because this story is so complicated and so complex, and in many ways we sort of just glimpse the surface of what all the connections were, and so many things we couldn't even touch on for either legal reasons or things that were just like it didn't fit. We didn't have the room for it. But like always knowing, okay, this is the truth. This is the fact of what happened. How can we, if we're going to change something, why are we doing it? And are we honoring the story truth of it when we do that? And so I think that was, it was the streamlining as the biggest narrative challenge, because you don't want to leave anything, narratively on the table, but you also have, we're 8 episodes in one season to tell this story. So that was really the biggest. And to me, the challenge is a positive thing, because it's how you make discoveries and how you find things that help you with the story. But that was really, that was the biggest one, because it is so sprawling and so all encompassing. I mean, there's generations going back of Murdaugh lore that we touch on, but we could have explored seasons of.
When you have a situation like this, where a family just collapses on itself like this, it's like familial annihilation. It's a thing where it's like, where you see families that absolutely sort of like rot from within and just destroy themselves. And I thought that you guys did a really good job of illustrating where that rot came from. And was that something that you were focused on when you were putting this together?
I will just say, and Erin and I, it was kind of how when we started the process. Erin, tell me if I'm, not speaking anything correctly, but it's like the events of this story are the events of this story. And so by virtue of our approach, hopefully that is our aim, to tell that, because we know there's no version you do of this, no dramatization, nothing that you're going to be inspired by where you don't get to the as you said, the family annihilation. And I think so, if our approach is what's the space like between these people, what's it like at their kitchen table, then by virtue of taking that approach and knowing that that's the benchmark we're building towards, then you're automatically exploring those things just by virtue of knowing this is where we're going with this. This is the way this, for lack of a better term, plot unfolds. This is what it's heading to. So, but that was important to us, is to show that this is, because any family that's, has been annihilated was first and foremost a family. And I think that's the thing for us that was really key, is like, okay, what was that family like before it was annihilated? Because it's not always, in most cases, and in the ones we've researched, Erin had so many that she brought into, as like, test subjects for us to look at other cases. It's like, it was never, some of them it's like, oh, there were warning signs, but most of those are in retrospect, and I think it's really, this man didn't he didn't wake up every morning from when he started a family trying to figure out at what point he was going to wipe them out,
Right, but at the same time, and I wanted to ask Jason about this. I mean, it's kind of breathtaking how narcissistic he is, it's, it's just incredible. There's so many moments where you're just like, you can't believe like the monster of selfishness that this person is. And at the same time, you know that he loves them. I really believe he loves them enough that it made me even have moments of doubt, thinking maybe he didn't do it. Maybe there was some other way. But then the next moment be like, no, that's just the pose that's most useful to him right now. It's like, what was it like for you in terms of trying to, essentially get into someone's head like that?
Look, straight up, Janet, it's enjoyable being a narcissist. It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable being a good old boy. You know what I mean? What's that Mel Brooks? It's good to be the king. I mean, so there's that whole side of it. And in that, I mean, narcissism. Look, I looked and thought about that a lot. And a lack of empathy as well. Ultimately, which is where he truly ends up, with a lack of empathy. The man, stands by his decision, I guess, in still not coming clean. I mean, look, there's the mechanical way of going through that and processing it, and then there's this subconscious way of just doing it. I'll say, with Addison and Katie, we used to listen to what you could term as narcissistic music and dance. You have to stay happy. You know what I mean? It's not easy being a full-time narcissist without any empathy. It's a full-time job, and like Katie and Addison, who are in my space so much, and we're probably two of the only people that I really let into my space, and to see my absurdity and my vulgarity at times, and my bad temper, and my fucking, I mean, we wrestled a lot. There's a lot of times and a lot of places where, people would walk away but they understand totally that it's a job as well, and that it's just fucking it's like, let's put on, so we'd do a lot of things, like even let's watch Will Ferrell to laugh, to get into fucking the plums just dripping down my chin. You have to have a the big thing to go out and just think, fuck it, I'm just concerned about me. You know what I mean? I'm a great guy, because it comes down to the end, because the implications of that are best expressed by the other people. You know what I mean? Like, there's a scene very early in scene 1 where Paul comes home, he's driven the truck and he's driving, and he pulls up to me. He says, "We're gonna go and shoot the guns." I says, "Fucking already did that, Bo." Fucking. Do you know what I mean? It plays out in certain ways, and you see on Paul, a narcissistic father who has no empathy for him. It's not that he's considered, and it plays out then in massive, massive ways, right to when you see me. Actually, you've seen the whole lot, right? I mean, I would say, yes, Paul's, the last thing he sees is my eyes. With Buster, when he finally, I love that scene that these guys wrote, when Buster says, "Well, you invited him, and Mum, why didn't you invite me?" And Alec lets him see, I don't give a fuck, Bo. You know what I mean? Just fucking, there's the road, dude. Don't turn right or left. Just keep going. You know what I mean? Do the math, Bo. So I think narcissism and empathy, they're a wonderful dichotomy. But so yes, straight up, it's enjoyable. It's exhausting. It's fucking horrible. You walk around, it's like that whole thing. Nobody's going to cry more than me when Daddy dies. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to fucking eat my fucking food, It's like, I'm going to shoot you dudes on the way back to the car just because it fucking entertains me, And so it's great, but yes, you need a lot of certain type of music to get up and just dance, You know what I mean? What's the other one we used to watch was Tom Cruise doing, when he at the end of Tropic Thunder,
Les Grossman.
Yes.
There's Grossman, I mean, and there's little references in there. There's a line of DJ Khaled's "All I Do Is Win." You know what I mean?
I want to get a brain freeze. Brain freeze too. That's a champion.
All I do is win.
And these are these things that you write up, and I would have a list of things. I just say, in case of emergency, just fucking go with one of these, man. Just win. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter whether it's poker or shooting or fucking our family lawyer service, or even the boat crash, and whether we're going to stay afloat or not. Paul's got to go, Maggie's got to go, or whether it's just a scorpion drink at the Bahamas. All I do is win. But yes, it leaves a hole to be that people pick you up out of and kind of support you and leave you alone in, you know. But at the same point, just straight up, a lot of fun, you know, if you really want to get up there and do it for 5 months in a you know, with carrying 15 extra kilograms and a fat suit and a red wig and red eyebrows. Yeah,
That was so much fun. That was a blast.
You don't get anything for nothing in this world. You know what I mean?
But I do think that, but that was also too the thing about that fun, which is like what was really crucial for us that you know, in crafting the arc of things, which then Jason obviously just, you know, picked up the baton and ran further.
But everybody
farther,
said he
faster.
was fun, you know.
But
Everybody
he's
said
fun.
the man was a good time.
He was a
you know?
great time to be around. Yeah.
Yeah,
that was
I mean,
important.
2 weeks after the judge says it, 2 weeks after the murder, you know, I saw you at Hilton Head, you know, when you were the life of the party.
Well, sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't because he wasn't because it wasn't bothered by it at all. But I think that's amazing that it's like, you know, you say it's fun. It's because like to live in.
But I mean, but you know, it's those things are my boundary post that you go. The judge who's just spent 2 years on 2 cases sentences says, you know, today is the final day. I'm going to sentence you, Alec. This is the financial crimes one, and he says, I've just, you know, we've been through all of this. And this is my last case. I retire. I close the book on my career and I close the book on you. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to turn the page. I've known you for 20 years. I saw you 2 weeks after the murders and I had empathy for you and sympathy for what you'd been through. And you were the life of the party. I had no idea. I now know everything that you have done up to that. I have no idea who you are, but this is it. I'm not going to attempt it anymore. I'm done with my career and I'm done with you. You know, have life. Goodbye. You know, there's these. So if you can be that type of man to convince this community after living them with your whole life that 2 weeks after you're in a totally different universe. I mean, that's you say, what's your level of narcissism? And I should say, well, I haven't found the ceiling yet. Let's just put on some more DJ Khaled and find that ceiling. You know, you got to find the ceiling. And I think that was the wonderful thing in the scripts. It was like, it's very easy to become a, you know, one thing is the ridiculous or a clown show, but also just become a boring show. You know what I mean? Just like, oh, we're a kitchen sink drama. And it's like, the dude was not a kitchen sink drama. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, he absolutely
Let's
was
get
not.
the jet going. Let's fucking get down to the Bahamas, Bo, and get 6 lobsters into us, you know? I mean, and that was, you know, it was an enjoyable process. It really was in that way. Very exhausting and very freeing. But, you know, it took all of everyone here to just, you know, you've got to then go, okay, well, yeah, how far do we want to go here? While making it real and keeping it real at every single level, whether it's sweat, script, dialogue, or the other cast members coming in, because they've got to work with you too. They can't be in a separate movie.
No. And it's
Hey,
like,
Jason, sorry, Dana, did you have your family with you at all, or your kids?
I did, yeah.
Was
I
that
mean,
weird
I didn't go
going
out for
home
6
at night?
months, John. Huh?
Was it hard going home at night?
Yeah, it was not easy. It was not easy on them, no. I mean, my boys, you know, it was a long time. My boys and my wife. My wife kept me, you know, reasonably fit as I put the weight on and then lost it for the last 2 episodes. Like, it took care of my diet and stuff. But I was in tracksuit pants with red eyebrows and short hair. You know, they understood that, you know, I became a little depressed, you know, because it was like, and then I'd gear myself up. And I mean, Katie and Addison are there, you know, you just get ready for, all you're concerned about is the start line, which is, you know, when we get that first shot off.
Yeah.
what did you have weight gain in addition to wearing a fat suit?
Yeah, I put on like 40 pounds.
Oh my God.
Yeah, in quite a short period of time. And then we took off. I ended up taking quite a bit for the last episode and a half. You know, because when you're spinning that, I mean, look, when I was, you know, because you're in a body clock is going so hard for all of us. I mean, it was an intense shoot that the minute I stopped eating, weight came off really quickly. You know, and then you just literally see it all of a sudden. Hey, I'm gonna put my jeans back on.
That's got to be a relief. I mean, it's also just like having an extra 40 pounds on you. That's got to make you move so differently.
No, it hurt. I had to go and get. My wife goes, "Oh my God, look at your legs! Look like you're a pregnant woman." You know, my legs were all swollen. My legs were literally all swollen from retaining water. To go get some leg masseuse things to No, it's not something I do again.
I remember we went to dinners, a few dinners during prep, and Jason was like, "What? Let me see the dessert menu." He's like, "Does anybody want?" And he'd be like, "All right, I'll get a couple of these and 2 of these," and then it's just like, just the four. And wife, with all of our children, I've put on sympathy weight, and I even with James, like, I'm going to do it. I'm just gonna, anything he's eating, I'm going to eat. I'm going to do it. And I did not get anywhere close to 40 pounds. Everybody was like, man, I can't. I can go to a point, but Jason goes so far beyond that with that commitment.
Well, is there anything else? Is there anything else? Any other major points you guys wanted to touch on?
Let's say something with the scripts quickly. I think what. And touch on anything we've also is when you read something to come and do it. A lot of these murder, true crime things, you just look at and they just play out. And that's the thing. So you're the good guy, you're the bad guy, you're the victim, you're the perpetrator. And I'm being very general here. But what you're truly looking for in any true story, and I played a few of them, whether it's Kennedy or Everest, you're looking for where does it deviate? Now, and are they getting sentimental on the gross level, on the certain level, or are they being didactic and insanely opinionated on the other one? You know what I mean? And you're looking for that. What is the license that this crew or this team is taking here with dealing with this subject matter? And I could not find one of them. And occasionally there were a couple of moments where it's like, okay, hang on, you want me to do that? Is that really? And we'd get in and we'd have some pretty intense discussions about them. And one was to do with episode 3 where I'm prowling around at the nightclub in the Bahamas, and I thought it was a little bit too rapey, to be on the gross. I'm talking very extreme things because when I break things down, and I thought that wasn't necessary. But one of the other things was like he is a great white shark. You know what I mean? He could eat you. He could keep swimming away, and we discussed the levels of that, and without even reaching a consensus, then you come to shoot in the space, and you find these ways because they add up to. What is more than the story that we know, which is what you said at the beginning, Dana, which brings you down to what is the point of this apart from ratings and numbers or whatever else, and earning a living, and that's what it becomes. And there were so many beautiful things the script and the writers put in there, like the end, the end of the episode where it starts with they're praying. Gloria's praying. I love the Gloria character because, as John said, but there's something wonderful about the acceptance of it. It's quite beautiful of her accepting it. And she says this prayer, they hold hands and they say, and Lord, Murdaughs are going through so much, let them have a good time in the Bahamas. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then it cuts straight to us coming out, let's get a hot fucking stone massage, huh? and those are the things which, they're the licenses that step it up and out. That's the springboard into, it becomes more than a kitchen sink drama, or it becomes you're beyond the reason of why should you pick this up or why should you not? This is an incredible story, and I think the writers particularly did justice to bringing this out right to the very last frame. And for me, when I watch them, they all become these little mini movies that do exist on their own.
Yeah, and I just think that, given like Hulu gave us the space to do that, right? There could have been a very reductionist sort of version that just was based in the facts, but they let Michael's writing sort of speak for itself, and there was a great trust that happened, and we got to work with our executive Nick and Tosca, who done Candy and the Act with them. And so in his amazing work, we were a part of that. And then just getting notes in, you're so nervous, it's going to be, I've heard the horror stories, and there just was a lot of this is it, right? And of course they had constructive notes, but they just kept saying how blown away by the performances. And it just really, when you're going strong in it, you're at the beginning and somebody can really knock you in the teeth and sort of cut you down. It was keep going, right? And that none of us can do that unless we have a system in which allows us to succeed.
Well, thank you guys so much for this.
Thank you.
Dana, thank you very much for a lovely conversation, really.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for everything.
Okay.
Dana,
Bye.
Take
care.
Did the Murdaughs tell you not to talk to me?
They have connections all the way up to the governor. I think we've only scratched the surface of what's going on here.